Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to each one of you. And thank you for joining us today for another insightful edition of the Capability Forum by Skillemme. So today's panel discussion is on a topic that resonates with every L&D professional, HR leader, and business leader. So learning programs don't fail, follow through does. Organizations today invest significant amount of time and resources in learning initiatives. Yet one question continues to challenge all of us. Why do so many learning programs fail to create lasting behavioral change and measurable business impact? More often than not, the answer lies not in the learning itself, but in what happens after learning. So today we have an exceptional panel of leaders who have been at the forefront of driving capability development and organizational transformation. They will share their experiences, insights, and practical strategies on how organizations can bridge the gap between learning and performance. So, to introduce our distinguished panelists for today, our first panelist is Ms. Panchali Das, SVP and Head of Talent at Zenoti. She brings deep expertise in talent strategy, leadership development, and building high performance cultures. Welcome, Ms. Panchali. So joining her is Mr. Siddiq Ahmed, Head of Training at Tech Mahindra Business Process Services. He has extensive experience in driving learning initiatives at scale and connecting capability development with operational excellence. Welcome, Mr. Siddiq. Also, we have with us Ms. Tamanna Tyagi, Human Resource Associate Learning at ZS. So she brings a fresh and practical perspective on learning, capability development, and creating meaningful employee growth experiences. Welcome, Tamanna. And final panelist for today's session is Ms. Jemima, Director, India Learning and Development at Trimont. So she is a seasoned L&D leader with valuable insights on creating sustainable learning ecosystems and strengthening organizational capability. Welcome, Ms. Jemima. So we are truly privileged to have such an accomplished panel with us today, and I'm confident that this discussion will provide valuable perspectives and actionable takeaways for everyone joining us. To steer today's conversation, we have someone who is deeply passionate about learning and capability development. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session, Mr. Kenneth Siguera, Learning and Contribution at H&M. Kenneth is a passionate learning practitioner who brings a strong perspective on capability building, creating a culture of continuous learning, and translating learning into tangible business impact. Welcome, Mr. Kenneth.
Thank you.
On behalf of Skillemme, I extend a heartfelt thank you to all our panelists and each one of you joining us today. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the session to our moderator, Mr. Kenneth Siguera. Over to you, Mr.
Thank you so much, Veer. Warm welcome to all those who've joined us on the call, and of course, a very warm welcome to all the panelists. I've always found that it's best not for the moderator to steer the conversation, but to just be a witness to all the wonderful insights that come in from panelists as distinguished and seasoned as yourselves. So that's what I'll look to do. And to begin with the proceedings, I thought we'll just have a little bit of context setting, right? Knowing the why before we can get to the what and the how of today's topic. Well, it's one of those points that almost every L&D leader can say that it's been a pain area for them, something that keeps us up at night or might wake us up in the middle of our sleep, knowing that we've had a successful program for leaders, for managers, for young professionals in different spaces. And we know the program has gone off well. We've received great feedback. Our program manager gets back to us saying all is good. But the sick feeling we're left with is, will they be able to recall the program? Will they be able to take it to the learnings from it to fruition and be able to create the impact with the intent with which the program was designed in the first place? Well, most times we don't really have an answer to it. And that's something that many organizations have struggled with. Hence the topic that learning programs really don't fail. It's the follow through that does. So I wanted to bring in all of our panelists, beginning first with Panchali, if I could get your input here on why does learning impact really disappear despite such significant investment of time and effort and energy into trainings in your experience?
Thanks, Kenneth. And, it is a very interesting topic, one that I've scratched my head around for the last, 2 decades or so. But eventually, and I'm with a fast-moving SaaS organization. What I've seen here is if there is no linkage between a business outcome and the learning intervention that we're bringing in, and if there is no way to embed what we're trying to learn or what we're trying to teach back to people's work, then it just goes away. You learn and hear lots of wonderful things during the course of a program, but it's the human brain, right? The moment you step out, it goes away, and the only way you make it stick is, if there are opportunities to be able to practice and rehearse it over and over, and the one short way of doing that is by embedding it into work. So that's really, if we are not able to do that linkage, then that's the reason why it just goes away.
So true that is, Panchali. Let me get in all our other panelists as well. Mr. Siddiq, if I could have your input on this in terms of what you've seen at TechM and other organizations, this connect between business outcomes and learning, how important it is, but also how often do you see this happen? Is it like a regular practice, or do we see this sort of happening inconsistently across organizations?
See, I think I should say I'm lucky to have an experience um, on, on different layers of training. For example, for Tech Mahindra BPS or my previous organization that I've worked for in the BPS industry, right? I'd worked for new hire training. I'd worked, okay, new hire training, it's a different ballgame altogether, right? And then comes the functional on the job training. And I've also handled behavioral and developmental training in my previous roles within TechM and previous organizations, right? Uh, while behavioral training and developmental training is a completely different ballgame and a different elephant altogether, right? I'll take my examples from new hire training for now, right? For let's say a batch of 25 people join, and if yes, they all go through standard training, right? They all go through standard training, standard assessments, standard skills, checks or skill evaluations, right? And then they go to the floor. But one thing that always keeps changing is the trainer, when they get a chance to go along with the associates and manage them, handhold them, on the job, then what we have noticed is there is a change in the way that batch performs. Plus, there is a change that this particular trainer brings back in the next new hire training, right? Because he is living that follow through on a day on day basis, right? Unlike when we are doing behavioral training, it's a different ballgame altogether, right? Now, whenever we do not do this, I've seen chaos come into picture and a very visible drop in performance when a trainer does not handhold the trainees on the production floor. Right? It could be for a couple of weeks. It could be for a month or two as well, depending on the complexity. So that's the experience that I wanted to share.
Yeah, and Mrs. Siddiq, you brought up a very important point of the fact that not all trainings are created equal. You see in certain cases with programs that are on the job learning and more experiential learning tends to have a better better response with the participants themselves, but also a long-lasting impact. So thank you for sharing that. Tamanna, if I could bring you in here, in your experience with ZS, what's this relation that you've seen with the training program's feedback and the end effect of programs? Do you see success all the time, or do you see sometimes things sort of fall through despite our best efforts?
Well, thanks. I think I really relate with this topic a lot because over the last 4 years that I've spent with ZS, I've been designing and delivering the learning programs for majorly all sorts of capabilities. That includes probably the new hires, also folks at a leadership level. What I've realized is that given I see this firsthand, and this topic is really really close to my work. What I've seen is the challenge here is not the classroom. Uh, in my view, the learning programs doesn't fail in the classroom. You can have the best of feedbacks post a session, but when it fails, or maybe when the follow through, where the follow through is difficult, is majorly with the ecosystem. I think there's an ecosystem required around the learners to that does support that change. For example, it is often seen as an HR capability. It's an HR function and it's an HR responsibility, but it is not. It's a collective decision. It's a collective effort. If managers, leaders, system, and learners themselves doesn't collectively own the application, then it's really difficult to, you know, to even the best design programs will struggle to create, I would say, lasting impacts if that ecosystem doesn't exist. So I think that's where I see some sort of gaps, and yes, that is what I would add in terms of this.
Thanks. And it brought to mind this quote that is sort of very famous, an African proverb, that it takes a village to raise a child. And sometimes I think there is a lack of support that learners get provided. And so it's, as much as we invest in the ecosystem of the classroom, I think it's important to also see the how much of investment in the ecosystem of work takes place from a learning standpoint. But thanks for that input. Jemima, may I bring your inputs in here, being part of, a company that uh, works closely with real estate organizations and looking to provide financial services to them. What's the connect that you've seen with the change in investment that we make in training being more strategic and its effect, as a spillover onto the impact that learning has created? Has there been any experience where you've seen that changing the investments that we make in learning has brought about that positive effect on the training program itself?
That's a very challenging question because it is very, organization specific.
Yeah.
So let me give you a broader view on what I
Mhm.
think, pertaining to your initial question of why it,
Yeah.
fails. And I will tie that back to what you have said. Couple of things. One is the way in which a training is delivered. Okay. And the second thing, which I think most of the panelists have already discussed about, is am I able to use it? I go back and am I able to use it? So the first reason why I mentioned was the learning. How is it being delivered? That's very important because each of us have a different learning methodology, learning curve. But neuroscience-backed research says that when you do short bursts of training with an application that allows your mind to retrieve that information, that strengthens your neurons, and so you develop the skill much more. And so even if I were to have the best of the training with this system, but if I do not have the process where I can retrieve that information and use it, I cannot. Same as building a muscle. You go to the gym, you pick up weights, you have to do it consistently. That's the same. So that is where I see. So now coming back to the organization where I'm working at, I have seen that right now, because this is just, at a nascent stage, just a year old, and there has been a lot of support from the leadership in terms of making meaningful changes and bringing in, different initiatives to encourage the learning, and we have seen tremendous growth. And this is not because of just creating some random learning programs, but tying it back to business and working from that end till the L&D front.
Hmm. And something interesting that you highlighted, Jemima, is the fact that we're not just focusing on the content and the format of the program, but also on how it is delivered. The format of it, particularly, you mentioned about the short bursts of training being done, and that, um, as you said, being backed by neuroscience. It means we are looking into research not just on the topic of training or on the area where people need to learn, but also on the research on how do people learn itself.
Yeah.
And with changing technologies, changing context, with every new generation that comes into the workforce, I'd imagine the way we need to engage our learners changes significantly from, say, the chalk and talk of the good old days to the short burst of learning and bite-sized learning, as we call it, that's made available through different platforms today. Thank you. Thank you, all of our dear panelists, for sharing such lovely insights already with just our first question. I'm thinking if I could get you to summarize perhaps um, one of the biggest reasons why do you think programs fail into a single word, what would be that one word that you feel, or let's make it a little broader, maybe one term that you think would be the biggest reason why learning, despite our best efforts, sometimes fails?
I would say application.
Application.
Yeah, I would go with that too.
I'll say lack of hunger for knowledge.
Yeah, for me, I think application sounds more relevant. Application or ownership could, two of these comes in my mind.
Wonderful. So application, ownership, lack of hunger, and it shows a clear pattern on how important the learner is in the equation, which is such a departure from how the training and development field itself sort of began with the focus that we have knowledge and we have insights and we have pieces that we require someone to be able to learn, and how do we deliver it to them? Instead, now the focus is really on the learner and how they can take things forward. Let's move on now to sort of get into the details of this question that we have great programs, but sometimes learning just doesn't stick there. So we know that we don't have shortage of training programs. I think I'm sure most of our calendars are inundated with different programs that we do. In fact, perhaps it's business that's pushing back, saying we have too much training going on. Can we rationalize and look at what is more important for us right now to do in the busy scheme of things? Where do you think is, and despite that, we still see a gap in the capabilities that individuals have. Um, with organizations, they always have the struggle that the learning calendar and the capability needs of the org sometimes just don't talk to each other. Where do you feel the gap really comes about in these two parts? Anyone could go for this question.
I mean, I would say that, if the learning calendar gets built without, you know, if it doesn't get co-created along with the business teams, then there is bound to be a gap, right? So, like people in that case, we're starting off on the wrong foot, right? And then after that, no matter what velocity you follow, how much investment you plow in, it doesn't matter because you're probably on a slightly deviated path versus what the organization really needs for its growth, right? So I would say that probably is one of the biggest drivers, right? And then the other things that follow, like, assuming that you've got that right and you've got, the business to support you, right? Yeah, I think Tamanna was speaking about the ecosystem, right? So is the manager involved? Does the manager know what the learner is learning, and can they play an active role in facilitating that learning, back into the place of work? That would be one important aspect. And the third aspect, I think, is psychological safety. Like, how open is the organization to, people changing the way they're working or adopting new behaviors or, experimenting with what they've learned? And if the three of these, or the three, four things that I just spoke about, are not happening in tandem, then something falls, right?
Mm.
Something doesn't work. And I
Mm.
think that's really, sort of fractures the process.
Very true. Keeping the floor open for any of the other panelists also to come in here.
Yeah, probably because I also picked application as the first one.
Mm.
I'll continue with that. I really agree with whatever Panchali mentioned, and I also believe that organizations do heavily invest in learning programs. But what's next? What if learners are returning to the same environment? They have the same deadline, same pressure. There's no reinforcement. from the system or from the teams, from the managers. I think if that would be the case, the best trainings would fade within weeks or days. It can't be just about the classroom. I have literally seen participants leave a workshop highly motivated with exceptional feedback scores. But just when they're back, the deadlines take over. There's little opportunity for them to practice that new skill. And trust me, without application, feedback, accountability, learning, someday would naturally, decay. Is it about performance or is it about development? That is a question. Uh, if you're learning just to perform better, I'm not sure. But if you are learning to develop something that will have an impact on our performance, could be a good tie-up. Uh, Also, as we as a function, we sometimes measure attendance and satisfaction instead of behavior change. By that I mean what has changed in 30, 60, 90 days after that program was completed. So was the application done well? Was that entire process owned by everybody that was supposed to be in that chain, including the learner, including the learning team, I'd say. Like, doesn't stop us to check in 30, 60, 90 days by a simple survey what's happening. So I think everyone, as I said, ecosystem, that of course is there. Everyone is responsible. But A, can they apply? B, are they taking the ownership of applying it?
Very true. And from what you and Panchali have shared, I think what's clearly coming out is that there is a larger role, the role that the L&D team plays, and sometimes, guilty is charged. In my 15 years of working, that has happened so many times where it's been told that, hey, L&D's responsibility is to create the calendar, so you go ahead and create one, and we put programs together based on the inputs that we've gathered broadly. But it's never a co-creation exercise, because the leaders and the managers also work with the assumption that, hey, that's your work to do, it's our work to attend, but then life happens, and then priorities have to be adjusted, and while the calendar is in place, people don't turn up, and then most times we're fighting just for let's get some people on the seats in the classroom. If we have 20 out of 25 people coming in, we count that as a big success, because it's been an uphill task to just get them there to the room. Wanted to get our other panelists as well in. Jamima, Siddiqui, if you have any inputs here on sort of things where we lose the track between creating the program and then seeing the capability being transformed.
Yeah, so my take is a little different here. What I'm looking at is when I look at a full calendar and I have a year-long, L&D calendar, what kind of trainings? Usually there are so many different trainings that are put on there that, it is mind-boggling. There is only that much of attention that someone can put in. So if these training programs, could be curated according to their role, and let's say per quarter, maybe a couple of trainings on their skill development as per their role. And then you also create what next, that is, what is the learning pathway. And so there is a clear transformation. And I think that the team member would also be interested in their career growth and they know where they're headed. So that direction becomes very important. And I think that is that's a must. And we need to think strategically, for the learner as well.
That's right. Yeah. Mrs. Siddiq, your words as well on this?
My perspective would be, right, so I'm going to stand behind the term that I used, the hunger for knowledge, right? Again, if you go back historically as well, we would have seen a lot of scholars traveling from one country to another, or sometimes one continent to another, right, in the hunger for knowledge. And there were other people, right, who just got their job done and they were not bothered about knowledge, right? So if a person has that hunger for learning something new or making the knowledge that they have more structured, it will help them go places, right? That is a similar energy that is going to get used when is there a way by which we can figure out people who has that hunger and track how they are learning, how they are absorbing that knowledge, and how they are applying it in their day-to-day work. If we can take that and figure out, is there a way that we can showcase it to others, it will help others as well, right? That's one of my perspective. However, in terms of follow-up, right, most of our learning programs today, especially the workshops that we conduct and things like that, what I have noticed is, yes, it's very difficult to get people out of their jobs to come to a training workshop. But then we spend a lot of time, that very important, sacred, rare time of our leaders or of the people managers, in starting with the basics, right? And cramping up a lot of stuff in that short span of time, right? So being a very strong influencer of using digital training, right? The way I would want to look at it is there a way we can do a follow through itself, as a part of training? For example, the initial part of the training, which is the knowledge, core knowledge, will have to be delivered digitally and remotely at scale, and then conduct a knowledge assessment remotely. We don't have the people to walk to a workshop, right? Then organize a workshop, and in the workshop, so now we are not doing follow through post training, we are doing training itself as a follow through, right? In the workshop, let's work on either imaginary scenarios or real scenarios that they face. If we can team them up together and make them work on real scenarios and real case studies, right? We will exactly know where they're getting stuck and what tools or what artifacts do they need. Do they need a particular type of template? Do they need a particular framework to solve that problem, right? The trainer or the facilitator can help them, right? Next comes, post that workshop, now they're going to carry a lot of these things, and because they have solved some problem or practice with solving some problem and they're carrying it. Now comes the post-training follow-up or post-workshop follow-up, wherein we go back and check with them, were you able to use those artifacts? Were you able to solve some problem? Can we, have that conversation around? And then the next follow-up would be on the business impact. So that is the ideal way that I think the future training programs would have to be designed as well.
Thank you for that. And it's I think you've sort of covered all the bases that we spoke of on this question around how do we bridge that gap. I think what was clearly standing out and a connect between this and even our earlier question on the fact that there is a lot of focus on what the learner does. And what's standing out for me is that we need to invest as much time as we do in the learning of the concepts into also the process of learning how to learn and develop that hunger and that curiosity, as you called out, Siddiq, to get individuals to learn, but also post-program to encourage this idea of reflection, of practice, bring in that rigor so that we're able to see the learning actually work on the ground, or maybe not work on the ground, but it's okay for us because at least we've tried. And we know through our trying in the 30, 60, 90 days what parts of it work and what doesn't, and we're able to move forward. So really interesting reflections that are coming through, and it segues perfectly into our next stage. We all spoke of the idea of the manager coming in. I'll perhaps broad base it to maybe the manager and the leader, because I think there is a role that both these stakeholders play in the life of the learner, in the way they're able to apply the learning back at work. Um, so as they say, if learning is a team sport, manager really then is the coach, and for us, ways to be able to involve the manager becomes important. I wanted to tap into the collective experience of the panel here and sort of know from your experience what have been successful ways in getting managers out of that passive mode and saying, hey, you know what, I want to be an active participant in helping my learner actually take the learning through.
Okay, we've experimented with a few things. We've got so there is a curriculum, and we've got the manager as a part of the whole journey, right? We've explained to the manager, and of course, the need for training would have come from them, would have come from somewhere in the business. So they have at the start of the whole initiative, they have an equal skin in the game in making sure that some of these behavioral changes are actually driven. But for some of our interventions, we've made managers as coaches in the whole journey, learning path or learning journey, right? And what we've done is at various checkpoints, we have manager checkpoints where somebody from the learning team, the manager, and the participants sort of sit together and really reflect on some of the skills that they've learned. And are they being able to turn those skills into capabilities that they can use on the job, right? And I'll give you an example where our we have a coaching intervention which we run for our product technical support teams, right? The collective success metric of that learning intervention is how many CSATs and how many DSATs we end up getting as a team, right? Including the teacher, the coach, right? So everybody then has a skin in the game saying, what are the things that we're learning? How does my manager facilitate that transfer of learning on the job? And then ultimately, how does that end in a better experience for my end customer? I think that's probably one of our successful experiments with getting the manager involved. Of course, we have multiple other experiences that have failed. They've not happened wonderfully, but this is one such experience where we can really say that the manager and the participant have really, joined together in ensuring that the learning transfer has happened.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. How about the other panelists? Anyone who'd like to come in here?
Sure, maybe I can add something from what we do here in ZS. The great thing is that most of our learning programs, I would say, yeah, most of them are in joint efforts, be it the new hire training, be it the milestone programs when somebody gets promoted, externally hired, we do a leadership program for them to be able to get ready for that role, or let it be the continuous calendar sessions that happens both on the technical and behavioral front. Over the years, the organization has realized, for example, what Sidki sir was mentioning, that it is important that they practice what are they going to be doing in their actual work. Are we the experts of it? Maybe not. The L&D team still reserves everything that is to do with designing a program, planning, execution, delivering, but it's always done in joint account. I can give you some examples. For example, we were looking. ZS is a really busy firm, to be honest. People here are really busy. Often we are spoken about work-life culture. It's typical terminology that is used for any consulting firm, honestly. And while we realized that that were getting onboarded from like top schools, top universities with excellent technical skills were still not able to contribute to the project right after their 2 weeks of onboarding. I'm not sure how many organizations have that kind of an onboarding program or an orientation, but we spend about 2 to 3 weeks on an individual just so we can get them project ready. Despite doing that, there was a deficit gap. And having realized that, the organization in joint efforts created a curriculum that starts right before somebody joins in. So now we have pre-boarding, that then onboarding, and then a space onboarding separately, because everyone works for different clients and that may need different learning altogether. But at the moment, if you're delivering a session, let's say if this is about Excel, for example, we have so many capabilities within our own CSRs that these people come in and deliver these. So that means the business and its relevance is being delivered firsthand. So it's not just an Excel formula told, but maybe the examples that are used, the use cases that are used, are also very relevant to what they will work. And that happens everywhere. Honestly, I would say 40% of our facilitators in any program is business representative, which helps us transfer the knowledge the way it is to be transferred and not just from an angle of an L&D personal. So I think here everybody is accountable. I would still say that the application still is the next challenge, which is when they go back to their busy schedules. But having managers included, I think everybody here is involved. So we make them understand that it's a joint effort and not just an HR related activity.
Very true. In fact, I'd say perhaps it's a larger effort that the business is then having to put in, because there is a bulk of the lifting that they carry out. My own experience perhaps connects to that aspect of having managers form a community of trainers, so to say, and then have them run the training versus perhaps getting an external person. Not to mention it has a calming effect on the L&D budget, but more than that, I think it's the connect that they're able to establish between what needs to be learned and how that application really happens in the business. I've seen this with other organizations as well. Jemima and Siddiq, I wanted to get your inputs now on a related part, because we're expecting, of course, managers here to be coaches, as Panchali and Tamanna put it, to have that joint effort with us and for them to really be involved from the beginning. Uh, it takes a certain set of skills, perhaps beyond what they know as people managers and as experts within their field of work, to be effective, to be effective coaches, to be able to effectively enable learning for their team members. What would you say, in your experience, are key capabilities that manager programs or intervention should focus on to build with the manager cadre in the organization?
Yeah, I agree with you on this, the question that you have raised, and that is very integral. The moment that we start calling them as managers, it becomes very transactional. And I think we should give them the sense of ownership and the investment that they put into their people and call them leaders, because what you call, they become. I am a true believer in that. So, having said that, one word that I would like to say is servant leadership. That means I, as a leader, how invested am I in my team members? Because they are an extension of the success that we are going to get as a team. So if they're not successful, I am not successful. And that pertains to a lot of improvement, because if I see my leader believe in me, and he's a cheerleader for me, he or she is a cheerleader for me, then I can go for miles. I know that I have someone backing up. And if that thought process is introduced, because at certain times it also becomes, because we're looking at metrics, we're looking at numbers, we're looking at how impactful the business, that becomes so much of importance that we fail to give that importance to the team members. And that balance has to be brought about.
Mr.
My
Siddiq, your inputs
recommendation.
as well here.
Yeah, my recommendation would be, when we design a training program, right, when we do our pre-assessments, especially for people leaders or people managers, right, involve the one-up manager or a skip manager to do the pre-assessment and post-assessment skill evaluation. What happens here is, right, they become an integral part of looking at how their team member was before and after, right? That's one advantage that we get. The other advantage that we get out of this is the person who is in training, right, will definitely have to pull up their socks and perform, because their reputation is also at stake, right? Not just the knowledge, the skill that they're going to improve. Now, the seriousness in the program or the training becomes multifold, because the manager is going to be involved. The manager or the skip manager already saw how I did. vis-a-vis how I'm going to do in the future. So I definitely have to put my heart and soul in getting that, to be showcased when my manager is going to do the end of training skill evaluation as well. Right? I saw this in practice in one of the organizations. It was mandatory that certain training programs and workshops, especially which will help a person become a people manager, right? It could be a trainer position, or it could be a assistant manager or above position and things like that. They mandated in the training that this is a practice, and this way, the manager also cannot come back and say, you know what, I don't know what kind of training you guys provided, right? After getting that person promoted, he cannot say that because he was part of the part of the whole process by itself.
Very true. And I think you've of course addressed the aspect of what we can do to involve the managers further. But I wanted to double click with you on the space because you brought up a very important point with the managers or the learners actually being more visible to the management through the assessment process because they're going through a pre and post. There's also the effect of you being observed and you being watched. There is that ability that it has to bring what is subconscious or what might be at the back of my mind to the front of my mind and be very conscious about it and say, okay, let me now try and consciously bring about the change that I am looking to do through this program. I wanted to get a double click on the skills that managers require to be able to carry out this assessment well. What are a few skills that you feel would be good for managers to have so that they can do a decent job of it and be effective in their process of evaluating and assessing and sharing their inputs for the team?
So I would start with critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? So critical thinking, and obviously all people managers will have to have a bent of mind on how they can handle and how they can share feedback, right? The nuances of how do you handle feedback and how do you share feedback, right? That's an important skill. And the third one would be their observational skills. How are they able to observe, how behaviors are exhibited, and can they document it and use their feedback skills to share it back with the trainee?
Thank you for that. There was another panelist I think who wanted to also come in.
Yes, I wanted to say,
Yes, Jamil.
Being the cheer coach, if I can use that term, for their team members, knowing the team member really well, so that you know when, even if there is a slight change, and you get to know, okay, what has caused this, and if there is a trigger, and how can I help? I think that awareness within a leader, that would make a tremendous impact on the team.
Just love that word, Jamima. Cheer coach. It's now going to be part of my lexicon going forward. Thank you for that. I think from all the lovely discussions we've been having for the past 45 minutes or so, there's been such beautiful insights that have come in specifically around the role that the learner plays, the role that the manager plays. I think there's a question that's come in from our LinkedIn chat as well. Let's try and bring that in. Wade has put that question here for us. Can you share one follow-through practice that has consistently worked has worked well in your organization? One follow-through practice that has consistently worked. So let's keep it brief, and each one of us, if I could invite you to share one practice that has worked consistently from a follow-through of learning.
So for me, it would be moving away from standalone trainings to learning journeys, which last over a period of time and get linked back to the work that people are doing.
Thank you for that. How about the others? The panel is open.
For the follow through, I think going back to the team member on the application as well as the manager or the leader on the application and having those checks, quite often to see, and if there is any improvement needed and if we can help in that. I think that is the only way. I mean, just touch base with them at each interval. I think that works beautifully.
Tamanna?
I think for us, two things kind of have worked in our organization. A, designing the programs as per what's needed. For example, very recently, we realized that we do a lot of calendar trainings. Those 2 hour sessions that we invite in people, these are relevant, but maybe we had a lot of enrollments versus not so great numbers in the turn up, considering, as I mentioned, GS is a busy firm. So we realized the pain points and now shifted everything with respect to the offering. So that ownership lied with us. That changed. The follow through happened because now our sessions are really targeted. That doesn't say come and learn effective verbal communication. They talk about how do you avoid rework and ask better questions. Is it is your analysis that is getting in the way of your impact. Uh, Ownership beyond your task. Probably these catchy names plus the change in the entire format, making 2 hour sessions to a shorter 1 hour 75-minute session has helped. That's the ownership of the learning team. Second thing is involving, as I mentioned, the managers, not just the managers, the leaders. It could be anyone they're reporting into, a culture that's created where people, after they've learned something, I'm specifically talking about developmental journeys that Panchali was talking about. Probably there are journeys that we've created. Now, post that, we involved a lot of leaders in it and let them, follow through with questions like, what did you learn? How are you applying it? What next support do you need? So I think it's both these two things that have worked well with uh, at GS for us for sure.
Yes. Okay. Siddiq sir, your inputs here. One thing that you have found consistently has worked.
I can give 100 things that did not work. Right, but one thing that I think it worked luckily for us is, a part of my team, right, also works on maturity models and audits using maturity models within the organization for the training function. Okay. And we have also inspired other teams to create such a practice. So what we do or we try to do is we include certain areas in the maturity model audits, okay, which will give a score for this for the particular learning function, or in ideally any function for that matter, right? The audit will return a score. In fact, it's a training management maturity model, which is an index that will come out of the audit, right? So this one has helped us a lot because it puts all the departments in the same stack, right? And we are measuring them in their own field or in their own area with a standard maturity model, and then putting a score. And then when their score gets impacted, the leaders tend to go back and figure out why is the score getting impacted, and then they're able to go fix that particular problem, right? If there is an impact problem or if there is a compliance problem, right? Did they go through this training or not? Or is all the trainers certified or not? You can replace this all the trainers with all the employees, right? So all of those particular stuff is plugged into it. We have a 5-level maturity model that we use in Tech and BPS. It actually helped me fixing a lot of problems.
I'm just inquiring now. This is the CMMI model, am I right?
I actually, copied the model, but created our own model for measuring the training management's maturity.
Okay.
So CMMI would be very organizational, right?
Organization focused,
So
yeah.
I just narrowed it down. Can we create 5-level models for training team, for quality team, right? So the training team actually can create it and start training people. And we can become the custodians, or if the quality team wants to become the custodians of it, we can hand it over to them and they can do it. It's a win-win.
Wonderful. Really great experiences that you all have shared. I think one that I could, if I may add to the mix, is leveraging the power of the community. With learning, we say that this is a journey that you go on, and as you move forward, the idea is once you've flown through the stream of learning that you've gone on this journey, at the end of it, you go into a little lake, and that lake is the community of learners, people who have done the same program or have gone on this journey before you. And what that community does is comes together ever so often to sort of connect with each other, to share their own experiences, to support each other through challenging moments, to be able to solve for issues that a training program couldn't speak about or maybe even didn't anticipate. And we found that the community becomes a great source for us to also tap into for advocates for the program, but more importantly, also finding our next level of trainers, coaches, mentors who support other learners who go into this journey. So that's one thing that I'd add to the mix. I'm very mindful of the time. We've got about 10 minutes remaining, and we've got our last piece that we wanted to look at. All of us, as we spoke, I realized we're moving towards this piece where we're realizing learning really isn't just about the program, it is about the journey, and therefore and the ecosystem that came up, and therefore it just makes natural sense for us to think of the learning culture. It's a topic that's been, it's a horse that's been flogged quite often in a lot of learning circles and a lot of L&D forums, but I wanted to bring this panel's attention to it, perhaps with your insights and your perspectives on uh, the learning culture of an organization, particularly from the specific point of the follow through on learning and seeing learning not just as a program people attend, uh, but as a journey that has impact on self, on manager, on teams, and on the business as a whole. So, what are some things in your experience that you see in a strong learning culture of an organization that contributes to this effect?
So I would like to answer that question.
Yeah.
Incentivize the learning programs. And I just don't mean by either an award or a badge or that. But let's say if you have this learning program and then you can give the opportunity for the team member to be a part of a project that's coming up where they get visibility as well as they get the choice of using that skill, they get the opportunity. That would be awesome.
Project participation, so create incentives. Excellent.
I think for me, organizations with learning culture maybe focus on behavior and not just outcomes. By that, I mean maybe focus on how people solve problems. How do they share knowledge? Are they continuously improving? Maybe in my experience, the learning culture that learning culture is visible when maybe managers regularly discuss about development and not just performance. Uh, as you mentioned about the community, Kenneth, do they learn from each other? Do we have that community? Um, Maybe the leaders, do they talk openly about what they are learning? Is it top-down approach? Is it embedded in the way they work, into their projects, their assignments, everyday work, rather than just an event on their calendar? So there should be like a consistent reinforcement after learning, because I don't think so. One workshop really changes behavior. So yeah, uh, it may be from moving away from what training is available, but rather than how can I learn what I need to get better on.
So true.
Learning culture is a very complex area, right? It's most of the time the dark corners of corporate world. So it takes a lot to actually create a learning culture. Like I said, right? Learning requires that self-drive or the fire in the belly or hunger to go for knowledge or search for knowledge, right? But looking at the current age that we are living in, right? Knowledge is actually very close to us. It's very, very close. We don't have to struggle hard. We don't have to, walk thousands of kilometers to hunt for it, right? It's very close to us. So we may have to figure out and take help of technology, right, in ensuring that learning on the floor rather than a structured learning program, if that is not possible within the constraints of the new age work environment, right? Is there a way to digitally enable setup for the employees so that they can learn on the floor, they can learn through technology and use technology to challenge them at some point in time. That way, they learn through that challenge as well. That's what I would recommend. Simple things like, if technology uh, is possible within the organization, if we can put a small a bot in all employees computer that can nudge a person to do this, or ask a question randomly about the work area that they work in, right? And asking things like, you have some time in your calendar. Are you ready to answer 10 questions right now so that we can plan what are the training sessions that you need to attend in the next 3 months? Something like this, right? So this is technologically possible nowadays. So I would say we will have to bring that technology element to, get the learning culture driven, because unless and until all of our employees have that hunger in the belly, achieving the ideal learning culture, I would say, is impossible.
Yeah, I think all relevant points, but I've typically seen, even within organizations, you see subcultures where, learning is seen as something aspirational, and those typically come from leaders and managers who feel like, learning will help you move the needle because they themselves have been beneficiaries of programs or interventions where they've seen their capabilities become better. Environments like those generally help people, and the associated culture of those teams really push through the whole aspect around learning. So that's really, it helps if you
Inspiring.
have a leader, yeah, who
Yeah.
sort of pushes it down.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, Panchal, you could see me nodding and smiling right away because I could instantly, I think of, and I could see everyone on the panel do that, because you could instantly, I would imagine, think of at least one leader, if not more, who's sort of played that role. And it's odd that it comes to mind, and sometimes it's rare. And we're blessed if we've had many such leaders who've done this. But yeah, you can't really underestimate the role that a leader plays, besides the drive that we try to build within individuals, focus on the behaviors, and look to build incentives. Um, all of those become also crucial in driving that culture. We're almost at the top of the hour, and I thought maybe as our last piece, maybe we could look to just get quick 30-second inputs from each one of you on if there's one action that you feel you'd want our listeners to take away from all the discussion that we've had. If I could get you to share that one elevator pitch of an action with our listeners.
So, there's one action that I want to leave the viewers with, which we did not get to discuss, was the use of AI. Right? And as a company, we're using AI to give us a bunch of analysis in terms of people's development areas. So, we do see it as something that augments our capability to actually help people get better. And I think, don't fear it, use it, embrace it. It can definitely enhance productivity.
Awesome. Use of AI to expand awareness.
I was consciously avoiding the word AI because that's the buzzword in all training. That's true, right? So interesting. So the key takeaway that I would give is, do not separate training from follow through, right? Or workshops from follow through. Integrate it within the process, right? And extend it beyond the workshop, so that way it becomes seamless, and it might not feel like we are very intrusive as a training team. You're very intrusive into their job. That's the takeaway that I want to give the listeners.
Perfect.
So I would
Jemima?
yes. So Panchali, you had brought in a good point on AI, and I think you started a revolution here. So yeah, according to World Economic Forum, 44% of our core skills, are going to be changed by 2030. And I think I would leave this as L&D, specialists, that we need to focus and be proactive in what is coming, and have that awareness so that we can prepare the workforce. Because if it is going to happen in the next 5 to 6 years, we should be well prepared for that. And that awareness needs to be there.
Awareness of workforce skills. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Tamanna?
I'm not going to touch on the, lines of AI because again, it's a topic in itself. But I'd say that as an L&D professional, what I leave the audience with is that our role will become more strategic. It's not going to be the questions like what training should we attend. For example, an employee might get away from this feeling, or as an L&D person, maybe we will get away from the fact of that what training should we do, what should be a part of calendar, but it will move to the points of what capabilities does the business need and how do we build it to scale, how do we design for application, how do we involve leaders and reinforce learning consistently. I think that's where the impact will be created.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So really clear actions that have come through from our panelists. I think as final words that I could share based on what I've heard from all of our lovely panel members, is clearly there is a connect that we can build between the learning program and the impact that's created in business on account of it, and follow through plays a very important role in it. But the way to do it is to work on the ecosystem, to work on the enablers of that learning, which means the managers, the leaders, the peer groups, the communities, everyone coming together to be able to help someone not just learn, but also be able to apply that learning back. And finally, the employee, who plays a large role with their hunger, with their self-drive, with their desire to expand their awareness and use all resources, including tech, including AI, to be able to expand on what they know about themselves and what they don't know, and how they can get there with learning. So thank you all so much once again for all your insights. I am richer for having attended this, for having moderated this session and having been part of it. So thank you all so much, dear panelists. And Veer, over to you.
Thanks, Kenneth. And thank you to all the panelists, Ms. Jemima, Ms. Panchali, Ms. Tamanna, and Mr. Siddiq, and definitely Mr. Kenneth for moderating the session. So it was very insightful for me, a lot of points to think, ponder on. As a learning partner, how do we also incorporate or engage our learners and how we can play our part in this learning journey along with you guys. So thank you very much. So a lot of things to ponder on, as I said. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and doing this and adding back to the L&D community. So I'm sure this discussion, since we'll be putting it on LinkedIn as well, and people who have watched it live, so it will be a very insightful video to go through. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you. Thank you very much.